All right, how are Americans viewing the U.S. banking system in the wake of the credit crunch and government bailouts? Rich Brose is Director of Research Consulting at Maritz Research. They conducted a poll that serves as a window to public sentiment on banks. He joins us now from St. Louis. Rich, thanks for coming on the show. I guess clearly you could have guessed that Americans aren't too thrilled about the banking situation in this country, but I wouldn't have guessed that they're so dismayed. Three-quarters of Americans basically think that we're going to see another bank failure within the next year, major bank failure.
Yeah, that's true, Matt. We found that in not only one poll that we did, but two. We conducted one right before the election, immediately before we came out of the field, and then one in the latter part of March and April. And we saw a pretty consistent finding there. A little bit, a few less folks believe there was going to be a failure, but we're still sitting at about three-quarters.
It's interesting, though, that while three-quarters of Americans believe that there will be a major bank failure in the next year, more than that think that their own bank will survive it.
Yeah, and that was almost the ray of sunshine that we saw in these findings, is that despite all the negative press and all the doom and gloom we're seeing in the marketplace, people are still very upbeat about their bank. They still trust their bank. They still believe their bank respects them as a customer, and 75% of them, as you mentioned, believe that their bank will survive the crisis.
Is it possibly a result of retail customers fleeing certain banks last year to others? I mean, have you seen that kind of data?
No, we really didn't explore that, but in a lot of the other work we do, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement. We don't see people really jumping ship from one bank to another.
All right, so two-thirds of the American people believe the government will nationalize a bank. Already, of course, one of the biggest banks in the world, the Fed, is nationalized here. But I'm assuming that Citigroup is another good candidate for that one.
Well, I mean, we really didn't get into the specific institutions. What we were looking at was trying to establish relationships between what people kind of thought was going to happen as opposed to what they believe should happen. And that was actually interesting because while, as you mentioned, two-thirds of the people thought that the government should take over, or will take over a major bank, will nationalize it. Only 25% thought that the government should do that. So there's a real disconnect there between what people are feeling should happen in the marketplace and what they actually believe will happen. So again, I think that's a sign of the kind of the skepticism that exists within the system.
They don't buy into nationalization, and that probably sort of runs against typical American ideals. But they do believe 60% almost in tighter regulation of the financial services industry.
Yes, that is correct. There is almost a siren call just based on the anger that was generated over the entire situation, not only the financial crisis, but also the situation with the automobile industry, that there is really some discontent. They believe regulation should be put in place, and there's also a call for tightening up credit availability.
I have to ask you, tightening up credit availability. So they want credit to be tightened up further.
They want credit to be tightened up. They want people to accept some responsibility for their actions.
A little deleveraging on a wish list there, although I'm sure people would like easy credit for themselves. Let me ask, while you mentioned the auto industry quickly, 61% of the people you surveyed thought the auto bailout was unnecessary, and more than half were angry that the auto industry even asked for money in the first place. Do you get the sense that people are more angry about the auto bailout or the bank bailout?
Well, I think it's about equal. The numbers that we saw were pretty equal. So people were just angry about the whole bailout situation in general. And there's also some skepticism, too, that crept in about, especially on the bank side, about how the banks are using those funds. So a very small portion, probably less than 20%, believe that the banks were actually helping to resolve the crisis with the bailout funds. So
rather than just hoarding cash.
Well, rather that, yeah, and we didn't get into what they would do with it. It was simply a matter of, do you think that, banks will help resolve the crisis with the bailout funds? So whether or not they thought the bailout was insufficient or the banks weren't doing what they needed to do, that's kind of the unanswered question.
All right, Rich, very interesting survey. Thanks so much for joining us. Rich Brose there, coming to us from Maritz Research in St. Louis.